Hello and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm your host, Bobby Howard. With me, we got Jameson Maxwell and Ty Lee, as always. And folks, we are here to start part one of our two-part roster breakdown. And we are starting with what is honestly the biggest change, I think, for this OU football team. The defense. Speed D is no more. Out with the Alex Grinch, undersized, whatever that was. In with a bit of smash mouth, Brent Venables defense, and I'm excited to talk about it. It's going to be an interesting transition period, and I think there are a lot of position groups to talk about for sure. This is going to be a longer podcast, but Jameson, just overall, before we go deep into all this, how are you feeling? Do you like the change in philosophy?
I do, obviously, because it feels like for the most part, a lot of those guys in Alex Grinch's scheme really didn't catch on to his speed D and, being in the right place and getting turnovers, because we kept badgering the players over and over. Turnovers. We need turnovers. And we never got any. We were really, really poor. Weren't we like one of the worst, like top 30 teams in the league of not getting turnovers? As one of the premier defensive, D1 teams, like that's kind of embarrassing. And I guarantee you that took a hit on a lot of the guys' confidence that they could not do what the coaches were asking of them.
Yeah, and I seem to remember Ty mentioning it a lot last year about how kind of random turnovers are. So, hanging your hat on that is a bit difficult. But Ty, your thoughts on the change in philosophy before we go in depth with everything.
For sure. 2 points. First point, I can tell, Bobby, that you were so excited. Like you said, last year and in the Alex Grinch era, we were just playing with an undersized D. And Bobby, I can tell that you are very excited to be playing with a larger D now. So I want to shout out Bobby for that. Yeah.
Turns out it actually, I'm just saying, sometimes it actually is about the size rather than what you can do with this.
Grinch always wanted it a little bit bigger, but unfortunately his partners were always a little bit too small.
Just a little disappointing, when it came to the moment, they just never arrived. It never came up.
Now that's a separate problem.
I know. Yeah, that's just unfortunate.
Anyways, when we're talking about the turnovers, though, like I don't know if I mentioned this analogy specifically, but having a defense that you expect to perform at the level that we were expected to perform, because we're talking about what is supposed to be a perennial playoff team. Having a defense that the entire scheme is predicated on, we're just going to force turnovers. That's like graduating from college and then deciding that your job is going to be just a full-time roulette player. Like it doesn't make it, you're never going to go anywhere with that. Like you cannot just keep spinning the wheel and hoping that you come up with turnovers on the, that's not a good thing. That's a good thing to practice in sort of like a cherry on top, not even the icing on the cake, the sprinkles on top of the cake, so to speak. You can't have an entire defense based on that. It just doesn't work. So I am very excited to have a national championship winning style defense back at Oklahoma again. That's what we were when we won the championships, all of our most recent championships, which were far too long ago. And that is what we are not necessarily strictly importing from Clemson, but very much importing the foundation of that Clemson defense that brought them so much success.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a total mentality shift. It's going to be exciting to see. And, Venables has said, look, this is year one. It's not going to, this isn't going to be like my teams at Clemson, but those teams at Clemson weren't that in year one for them either. So it'll be very interesting to see how it pans out. But so let's get into it. Let's start right up front with the trenches, the defensive line. And Jameson, let us know, who do we got on the D-line? This is probably the unit with the most amount of turnover after losing Perrion Winfrey and Nick Bonito and Isaiah Thomas. So this is going to be a refreshed, different looking defensive line. So let's get into it. Who do we got at D-line?
Yeah, let's kind of break it down first by what the defense is going to look like, just by position group. So you can kind of like envision what a Brent Venables and Roof defense kind of looks like. You'll have two defensive ends, one of them kind of in a jack position with two internal defensive tackles. Then you have 2 inside linebackers, one weak side and one, middle. And then there'll be what they call a cheetah. Think, like Isaiah Simmons and Clemson obviously made this very, very well known. Kind of a do-it-all outside linebacker / nickelback hybrid. We're still working on getting the perfect guy for that position, but stay tuned for the rest of the episode if we talk about that cheetah position, which would be a really interesting thing to watch throughout the season. And then you got your traditional, cornerback, and then strong safety, free safety to get your 11th man on the defense. But let's talk about defensive ends first. Right now, looking at it, I would think Reggie Grimes is poised for a big year. To be the starter at one of those defensive end. And I think Ethan Downs probably earned the position to start at the other defensive end at that kind of jack position. He is a guy that got sent to media days in Ethan Downs, and it's a guy that the team is really looking up to him, as a strong, hardworking guy that made a lot of good plays last year as a freshman. So even though there's guys like Marcus Stripling, who's now a senior and has showed a lot of good things, and the transfer from Hawaii and Jonah Laulu, honestly, I think Reggie Grimes and Ethan Downs are your projected defensive ends.
Yeah, wow, that would be pretty big. And Downs is, that's a large individual right there. And it's I think we saw a lot of really good stuff out of Reggie Grimes, especially towards the end of last year as well. So that's very exciting. Ty, your thoughts?
No real sort of specific thoughts, but just again that reiteration of the line is where it's at. Arguably, maybe the most important position group when you're looking at building a championship team. So it will. Obviously, Venables is known for his D lines. So, like we keep saying, year one, or I almost like to use the term right now, year zero, because we haven't even started. So, don't have unrealistic expectations, but this is the spot that I'm most excited about.
Yeah,
it's a huge position. Obviously, defensive line is what wins you games, and that's we saw it with Georgia last year as the championship team. Their defensive line was big time. Obviously, Jordan Davis being in the middle of it was a big deal. We still got a little bit of work to kind of get that star-studded defensive line that they do. But even though it's the weakest position on our on our defense, I'd say out of the 3 levels, this isn't a type of weakness where we've had in the past at OU, where it's like our secondary, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, where it's like I look at that secondary and I'm like, ooh, that could be a huge problem for us in the middle of the season. This defensive line, even though it's the worst, I think out of the 3 groups, I still feel pretty confident in.
Yeah, just because it's it's one of those where personnel wise, it's not quite there. It would have been a transition year if Lincoln stayed. That was just going to happen. But, in terms of coaching staff wise, Miguel Chavis and, I'm blanking so hard. Oh my God. Who's our interior?
Bates.
Yeah. Todd Bates. Those 2 are as good as it gets coaching wise. So I feel like that kind of offsets some of the personnel. One name I have circled is Jeffrey Johnson, the Tulane transfer.
Yeah. Let's talk defensive tackle with that, Bobby.
Yeah,
because I think that's definitely a guy that we need to talk about. I think he'd be at one of the defensive tackles, and then our best guy on the defensive line would be Jalen Redmond. I feel Jalen Redmond has the potential to push us to where that defensive line isn't the weakest link and can be a pretty strong unit if he makes that next step and becomes a guy who can be a draft pick, a 3rd, 4th, 5th round kind of guy. He has the athleticism, but it seems like he's been in and out of the lineup, and he's never really been conditioned for the season because it's something he's always had a hiccup throughout his whole season. But like we always say with defensive line, you need depth because these guys aren't playing every single snap. So Jeffrey Johnson's a lot of fun. Obviously, I would love to hear what you saw from him in the Tulane game because we talked a lot about it last year. And then Isaiah Coe is another guy that really we need to talk about the defensive tackle because he looks ginormous, absolutely huge. He definitely is the guy who can lift the most on this team, and he's going to hopefully make a next big step. And then we've been waiting on Jordan Kelly for a really long time too. Him and Josh Ellison being seniors, they can hopefully move in and step into this new role and get some depth, at that defensive tackle and make some big plays. But I'm really excited to hear and see what Jeffrey Johnson does this season.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was probably one of the more coveted players in the transfer portal this year. And, looking at that film from the Tulane game last year, he just straight up bullied that OU line on multiple occasions. And, it's bad. Look, that line got bullied a lot, but when it's a Tulane guy doing that, that raises some eyebrows. So Johnson, I think he's very exciting. I would highlight him as one of those guys who could really make an impact. But, everyone likes the new flashy thing. I personally think Jalen Redmond, if he can stay healthy, avoid any issues with, as we've mentioned, he has issues with blood clotting, is something that has kind of been brought up. If he can stay healthy and all that, I think he can be a major impact player on the interior for sure.
I think Jeffrey Johnson, again, the Tulane transfer, I want to sort of bring it back to him real quick. We have to mention that it already seems like he has great chemistry or some sort of great bond already with Todd Bates. I know it's sort of old news. We've kind of discussed it before, but we have to mention again that hilarious announcement tweet of him coming to OU where he is down on all fours in sort of a lineman position, but then Coach Todd Bates is holding him back, sort of almost like I don't even know, like a wild
like a Rottweiler
about to attack. Yeah,
got that dog in him.
It is an amazing, and just both of them have their eyes just locked into the camera. It is, it's definitely something a little different, but you love the goofiness and you love to see that sort of bond because again, like we're talking about season 0 with this OU team, it's all new. Obviously, a lot of turnover parts, but building that culture is going to be a big thing. Lines are not necessarily something that you get overnight. Lines, championship winning lines, offense or defense, are grown. You have to cultivate that. You have to build that. There is a whole lot of chemistry that goes on and a whole lot of coordination and teamwork within that line. You can't just, take a bunch of dudes that have never worked together and form an effective line, even if they have great stats. So you have to build that. We do have a lot of seniority on this line, especially with a lot of the OU guys staying. So right now, I think it's realistic to say with this defensive line especially, I think we're at a good point in that it is not a stopgap. It's the line that we have, but it's not going to be our line that we're going to have for very long. So it's something that is going to be a mutually beneficial relationship between these players who are some now getting play time that they've waited a long time for and building their resume for whatever they're doing after, or maybe if they're not playing football after this, they're still getting some snaps and getting to play their senior season or whatever in college football. It's extremely special no matter how they're taking it. But also on the OU side, we can use these guys building their resume, building their playing time, whatever else, to sort of set the groundwork for recruiting and for cultivating and developing our whatever the football term would be for sort of our tactics and techniques for employing that line. So we're at a very exciting point, but it's not necessarily one that I think we should. OU fans is what I'm trying to say is no matter how this goes, don't get emotionally attached to sort of the line that we have this next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really key that you say that because there's obviously a lot of recruiting that goes into this. We're seeing right now with our current class, a lot of these high-end guys, think they can come in and start pretty quickly. We have a lot of seniority, and that's good for a weaker position, even though it's not weak. Our weaker position, the defensive line. Reggie Grimes being a junior. Ethan Downs is a very grown sophomore. He's very, he's not your average sophomore. And Jalen Redmond, junior, and Jeffrey Johnson being transfer senior. Isaiah Coe being a senior. Jordan Kelly being a senior. Jonah Laulu being a senior. Marcus Stripling being a senior. We got a lot there. So there's going to be a lot of overturn with this moving into the next season, but still something that I'm not worried about being our Achilles heel.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's not like we've had units that have been just completely like, this is not functioning, which look, they aren't, this isn't Ferrari. We don't have, this isn't or that actually probably is an insult depending.
Oh man, I was about to say, are we starting this?
Hey, look, this is not a pack of Red Bulls. This might be like a reliable, like whatever Alpine has, but they're not like, we're not rolling out like a bunch of Williamses. We're not rolling out the Haas cars. like we used to in like 2017. This is a reliable car, a reliable vehicle that'll get you somewhere in the middle. But you can't look at them and be like, "Hey, I expect you to run with the big dogs," or be like the Dexter,
He's going in deep
intense
here.
levels of what Clemson had. That's just not, they aren't that. Like you said, with recruiting, we've been getting some legit dudes, currently, predicted or signed or whatever. And things are going to be better. We are going to get Clemson level lines. This just isn't it yet. Ty, any rebuttal on on my car comps?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that our audience base is connecting with the F1 analogies. It seemed like we were kind of losing viewers by the second, but
hey, much worse than my girlfriend analogy that I made last week, right?
Hey,
that
I'm
was
doing my
just,
best. I'm doing my best.
Hey, I got some feedback from one person that said they actually really liked it, so I'm just gonna say that.
Okay, good on you. Good on you.
Let's move on to linebacker now. Obviously, linebacker is a really big point because if your defensive line is not making the plays that they need to, having a do-it-all guy who can make all of the tackles can kind of clean up some of the rough edges. And Danny Stutzman looks like to be that beast. We talked about it whenever he came in as a freshman. This guy just plays like a psychopath, running around the whole defense, and you can tell he just doesn't feel pain. He does not feel being tired. The man was playing with the brace on his elbow, which I'm pretty sure he just dislocated and just played with it for the rest of the season last year. I think that he is going to make a huge jump this season. I think a lot of people that pay attention to OU also agree with me on that sentiment. And then on the other side, with him, probably, I'm guessing Danny Stutzman played the weak side. And the middle linebacker, I think it's kind of a heads up. If Danny Stutzman is not playing the middle linebacker and he's playing the will, I think that David Ugwebu would be our middle linebacker, but I could also see it switch around where Danny Stutzman plays the Mike and Deshaun White plays the will. But we'll have to see that moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's definitely going to be a question for sure. I think Stutzman, he's the guy who I think, we're not getting to superlatives yet or like, breakouts, but I think he is a very, very good candidate for someone who could really make that leap. And I feel like this coaching staff can really help him get that way. If you take a look at, what you've seen, with, kind of these guys after summer conditioning, he's one of those dudes who's looking like a dude. So, I think I agree. I think Stutzman can take that leap. It's just a matter of where everyone fits. I think that's going to be really intriguing to see.
I've got two really big points on the linebackers. My first point is a very sort of wave top analysis idea, but hopefully it resonates with some of our viewers, because I think I connect with the viewers in a sense that Jameson, you and Bobby do not. And that's in the manner that you guys are much more into the weeds to this stuff. And that's a good thing, right? Because if all three of us were just sort of wave top, casual fans, it wouldn't make for very good content. But I'm sort of kept on board as that the sounding board for, does this make sense to someone that understands truly nothing about college football? That's my role here. But when I look at the linebackers, to sort of read into that analysis, one of the things that really clicks is when we start to mention the names outside of Stutzman, who I'm about to talk about, is it's a lot of familiar names. And that is a good thing when we're talking about a complete turnover here. So while everyone might have their individual gripes with each one of these players, it shows obviously good retention, but we need to have that carryover. A lot of people would argue linebackers are potentially the most important position on the defense. Obviously, there's arguments to be made across the board, but it's good to hear, just as a wave top analysis, a lot of returning names, because they're guys that have the relationships in the locker room, that understand sort of how things have been done, have chosen to remain in this new system, and that continuity is coming across. That's important. With Stutzman, I want to get on sort of my soapbox that I sort of make all the time about, this is an entertainment business. It's not actually about putting the ball in the end zone. Obviously, that is
Okay.
ultimately what entertains people. But the objective of
Honestly.
college football is not to play college football. It's entertainment. It's all about the fans. If there weren't these massive fan bases that are entertained by it, right, we wouldn't have scholarship athletes. It would be IMs, which are wildly entertaining also. But that's sort of the basis. But Stutzman, I want to give him credit because I think he is what the future of college football is. He's an entertaining guy. He's a guy. He just has that sort of personality. Are his X's and O's his on-field performance? Is he the best linebacker on the team? I don't know.
Yes.
Is he the best sort of athlete on the team? I don't know. But when you look at the full package, I really think he's won a ton of money-making potential because of his personality. People haven't been exposed to it really because he hasn't had the play time yet. But he's not. I don't want to compare him to the B word. Obviously, we can read into that when it comes to entertaining OU linebackers that were good and also entertaining personalities. I'm never going to make that comparison with anyone, but you guys can sort of read in not the curse word B word, but we all know where I'm going with this. But that's sort of similar, with what he's like in terms of his personality, and I think that's the future of college athletes and the future of athletes as a whole is that sort of more entertainer aspect as we start to. Now we're getting really high level because you guys are continuing to let me go, but the all access idea of athletes and entertainers now, where they're on the field presence and in the press conferences, but also on their social media, if they have a YouTube page like Hang Time or Punter, or if they have, they stream all the time. It's just you have that constant connectivity with these people, and it's much more WWE like. And Danny Stutzman, more than anyone else on this OU team, plays into that. I'm going to cut myself off because you guys are going to let me go for 2 hours about the future of entertainment.
I will. Hey, no, I'm with you. I think he's very exciting, and I think that's a part of his charm for sure. Jameson, you good there?
God. Yeah. I really enjoy that, Ty. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to see with this middle linebacker and inside linebacking crew. Because to be honest, if I had it my way, what I want to see is I want to see Danny Stutzman be the Mike. I think he can be the leader of the defense and be that middle linebacker all over the field kind of guy. I think the weak side, allows him to kind of showcase more of his athleticism and kind of a coverage guy. But to be honest with you, even though David Ugwoegbu showed a lot of stuff early in his career and he's just a physical specimen, I do get a little bit worried about him being a handicap in the coverage side of things. We saw him get lost a lot in the scheme last year with Grinch. And I don't know if that was just because he wasn't catching on to the scheme, but it showed that you can kind of, take advantage of him if you get him covered onto a running back. And that's just something I don't want to see again. With Deshaun White, I feel like he had a good couple of years whenever he was younger, but then he kind of went away for a bit. So if I had it my way, I want to see Mike, Danny Stutzman, Will, Deshaun White, but I would not be surprised if it's Ugwoegbu and Stutzman to actually start the season.
Yeah, for sure. And just looking at this roster, it seems like it's a really young roster. I mean, you have, or at least in the linebacking core, you have Deshaun White and Ugwoegbu as the only true seniors for on OU that didn't transfer. TD Roof is a transfer, but is a senior, but transferred in from App State. So nice to have a Yosef player on the Sooners. That's fun. But a lot of freshmen. So of the guys, let's say Jaron Kanak, Kobe McKenzie, and Kip Lewis, who do you think is most likely to get burned to get some reps in live action?
It's got to be Jaron Kanak. And this is where I want to move forward with the cheetah role. I think Jaron Kanak is the guy that can be that cheetah. He might not be as much nickelbacky. Oh man, I don't know how that came out, but it's good like a nickelback. But he, is a perfect Sam kind of guy, and he's probably the closest thing you'll get to an Isaiah Simmons that we have on this roster, other than Harrington, who has quit football for a little bit. So I think that he could really get some run at the backup role with that cheetah. But right now, I think we kind of have to hedge our bets and put a nickelback in that position who has a good football IQ and gets in the right place a lot of the times, but might not be the sexiest player in Justin Broyles. I think Justin Broyles really made an improvement last year. He was a type of guy 2 years ago that I was worried that he's just going to get burned over and over. And maybe that LSU game in Atlanta really kind of tarnished my thoughts of him. But I thought he played really well last year. And I think even though he doesn't fit the exact mold of what we see as a cheetah moving forward in this Brent Venables scheme, I think he's a really good stopgap. And I think he'll make a lot of good plays at that position.
Yeah, and I will say about Broyles, you can tell that Venables really does have a lot of, admiration for the guy. I believe he was one of the few people he took to media day as one of the leaders of the team. So I think that's something that's a good observation for sure.
Yeah, real quick, Jameson, you said Justin Broyles may not be the sexiest player. Who is, in your opinion, the sexiest player on the defense? Obviously, we're talking about the defense today. So
I already talked about how big Isaiah Coe's biceps were. So does that count?
Okay. Much like Bobby at the start of the episode, it is in some ways a size thing for you as well.
Well, hold on. Well, think about Danny Stutzman and that stash, though.
But dude, have you seen his picture that he took for in the suits for his headshot? You could tell he had been up all night drinking and just rolled out of bed did not do his hair, and his hair was sideways. I mean,
So Bobby, with that, well, you say that, but it could also be I don't know if y'all did this, Jameson, but I know it was sort of commonplace for, say, fraternity composites to sort of get a black eye or deliberately look a certain way in your picture just for the meme. So that it could also be that, but
yeah,
you
that's
never
probably
know. Honestly, Stutzman, it could be anything. But I think, yeah, I really do like Kanak Bobby to answer your past question, even though we kind of talked about the cheetah. I think he shows a lot in terms of just being a physical specimen. He does not look like a freshman. And also, it just seems like he's been performing really well on campus from what I've been reading on message boards. So I'm excited to see him in that position, kind of a change of pace from Broyles to be more of a Sam type rather than a nickelback at that cheetah. But other than that, I'm excited to see Shane Witter too. Feel like he's a guy who's got the speed, and he might not have really kind of made his mark yet on this defense whenever we thought that we could kind of got a diamond in the rough whenever we recruited him. I think he might show a little bit here and there with a little bit of the inside linebacker, and I'd hope he might get some role at the cheetah. But let's move on. Let's talk about the defensive backs to end off this defensive depth chart preview, and then we can kind of talk about some overriding themes and expectations for this defense moving forward into the season. Let's first start talking about the cornerbacks, and I think this might be the most interesting competition out of the whole defensive 11. I'm one cornerback. I think it's Woody Washington. There's no conversation. He obviously had solidified himself a couple of years ago as that guy and has not looked back. But now at that second cornerback, I think there's a conversation. DJ Graham, yes, he made a very big, play in the Texas game, and he always made the flashy play, but he got burned a lot. He really did. And now he's got a lot of competition behind him. Josh Eaton continues to make strides. Jaden Davis has been here for a long time, and he's a senior. Kendall Dennis is finally getting some run, got an interception in one of the practices, and it seems like he'd been hiding, in Grinch's scheme for the longest time whenever he was a guy that was recruited because he got so many interceptions in high school. And then we also got to talk about, guys like CJ Colden and Morrison from North Carolina. Those are guys that have plenty of experience and should be getting run. And then another transfer that a lot of people I know, I keep on going. There's so much competition at this cornerback position. Kenai Walker from Louisville is a guy that was getting a lot of good hype from the spring, saying this guy could actually be the starter at that number 2 cornerback. So to be completely honest with you, I still think it's DJ Graham to start the season, but I think he loses it to one of these guys.
I mean, I wouldn't call it like a stacked group because I don't think there's just like a bunch of guys who are really, really good. But I think it's definitely like really, really even. I think it's going to be a battle all season long. I don't think, like you said, I think Graham, he had his moments. Obviously that Nebraska catch was really cool, but like you said,
wasn't it Texas? I said Texas.
Nebraska.
Yeah.
What
was something? Did something big happen?
I think he got burnt in Nebraska. I think he got burnt against Texas.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah, he got burnt against Texas and made that big one-handed catch against Nebraska at home. When he probably should have dropped it. Lincoln try to challenge interception, try to take his pick away. It's funny. But no, I think that rotation is going to be really good. It's going to be a battle, and I'm with you. I think I would expect to see DJ Graham out there against UTEP, starting, but we'll see. It's a long camp. It's a long camp for sure.
I think when I look at the cornerbacks specifically, the first thing that really comes to mind that we didn't touch on is they were, I don't want to say always, they were very frequently starting from a position of disadvantage. Obviously, it's a skill on skill position, but looking at the schemes and the overriding defensive scheme and the idea and the plays and just sort of our overall defensive performance, coaching wise and strategy wise, which I would term strategy is everything, left of or prior to the initial kick, and then we're coaching after that. But they were very often in a position of disadvantage. So I think it will be very difficult to judge future performance with this incoming completely different defense based on what happened last time. Because ultimately, not to diminish their job, but for the line, their schemes might change, but their job doesn't really change. And I guess to some extent, every position group, the job doesn't fundamentally change ever, but the cornerbacks especially were in a rough spot schematically a lot of the time in our past defense. So I think that's an important caveat to looking at them. But like we're talking about, DJ Graham, again, the biggest name. I think he is the expected starter. And all three of us mentioned it, or both of you guys mentioned it. I'm going to mention it again. Can't talk about him without talking about the catch. It's on every college game day intro, every ESPN college football preview, all over, all the time. That will always stick with him, just tremendous feat of athleticism. But again, like we talked about, was it the smartest move? Objectively, no. But that can't be taken away, that feat of athleticism. So you have to mention that he was burned a lot. And we made this, or I made this comparison, or one of us made this comparison last season. He is almost like a less skilled, but also, again, in a worse position, Zach Sanchez, to use a name that we should all be familiar with. He was one of those guys that was always going for it. He will always throw away whatever the scheme is for personal gain, for going for that interception if he can. But here's the difference. Zach Sanchez was much better at getting that interception, and he was much better at actually playing the position. But
I don't know about this one, Ty. You're gonna have to convince me some more.
You don't like it?
I think he is, a similar.
I'm talking about just his mentality, right? If he can just completely abandon his assignment for personal gain, he'll do it.
I disagree. I think that whenever you're going for an interception, even if it's on fourth down, you're just playing with that. I think more so, say like Jordan Thomas and Zach Sanchez is of the past. I think those are pure cornerbacks, but obviously they just had a lot of faults. I think DJ Graham, kind of what it comes down to is he came in as an athlete and he played, wide receiver and D-back, and we didn't know what he was going to be until his freshman year. And all of a sudden he played really well as a freshman, which we've seen from all kinds of OU defensive backs in the past. Seems like their greatest freshmen. It happened with Jaden Davis. Then all of a sudden we just start to see them fall down the depth chart a little bit. To be honest with you, it does not help coming in to this defensive back room as an athlete, and your coach at that position was a linebackers coach. He was not coached well to succeed and maintain stability as a cornerback. But now that Jay Vallee's here, that's a completely different story. So we should be hopefully not seeing those things in the past where guys get burned continuously at the cornerback position, and people will play with more, actual good, what is the word? Footwork and scheme. I'm losing a word here.
I think we are. Jeez. I think we're saying the same thing. I think you're saying it at sort of a 12th grade level, and I'm saying it at like a 4th grade level. But
you're saying it's his choice. I'm saying it was not his fault.
I went on a 2-minute sort of pre-monologue about how they were most often in a bad position, and that's.
But you said you were doing it for like his gain. I think like when you're out there on the field, you don't think of obviously.
Well, when you go when you have an assignment and you think you can get an interception and you throw it away to go get burned on a silly trying to go for an interception, that's I don't know. I'm not trying to argue, but I think that is you're making a decision for it's you're throwing away your assignment for personal gain, which if you're Zach Sanchez and you're really good at doing that comparatively, and you get the interceptions a lot of the time, it sometimes can even out. Like I swear he would give up a touchdown once a game, but he'd also get an interception once a game. And it's sort of balanced out because interceptions look really cool on highlight reels. DJ Graham kind of tries to do the same thing, but he's only got one cool highlight reel interception and then just a lot of given up touchdowns.
It's like in the old NCAA 14 game, how you can play for the pick, but you get burnt more often. You can adjust how your defense plays.
I just sim the defense, but yeah.
I love playing defense on NCAA more than offense, but that's just me. But I think more so the difference between the two. If DJ Graham was doing this whenever he's a senior, and he's getting burned, he's hopping routes, I agree with you, Ty. But right now, I think that he just didn't have, the footwork and the ability to play the cornerback and that knowledge that he should have been taught throughout his time as a underclassman at OU. That absolutely was stunted by having one of the, handicaps of this defense in Roy Manning. Roy Manning, as soon as we hired him, I said, this is not good. This is not good. He's never coached the defensive backs. But maybe we'll see. And he continued to show that he was not developing our guys. Our position group continuously got worse in the secondary. So Jay Vallee obviously has a lot of clout at that position coming from Alabama, and I expect improvement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I fully agree with you. Want to move on to the safeties?
Yeah, let's talk about the safeties. Just kind of finish everything out here. I think this is probably what I feel is like the most solid of a group, where I don't think these guys are going to get benched for a player that's behind them. I think Billy Bowman at the strong safety will finally come into, his skin and be that guy, that mega athlete that can make plays in this new scheme, especially away from the Grinch and Manning that threw him all over the field, never really let him settle in as a true freshman. He kind of found his home at the end as a safety, and I think he'll do really well next to RIP DTY. Shout out Ty. And I really think
he gets my game ball of the season, by the way.
Yeah,
damn right.
Also, yeah,
because he inspired this generation.
Quick note: RIP DTY. As you can see, he's not dead, just graduated, but RIP.
That's good. You have a really, really special skill of saying RIP. People that are still alive, and then talking about people that are dead that are.
And conversely, yep.
You just never get it right.
But the other guy in the safety room that honestly I think could be the leader and probably already is the leader of this defense is Key Lawrence at the safety position. Transfer from Tennessee, mega athlete, and he was, our one shining moment of that. Not the ironic version of that one shining moment, like legitimately our one shining moment of that secondary last year. Whenever he got thrusted into competition, he played really well at the safety. Then we moved him to the cornerback, and he continued to do really well. I think you put him at the free safety, let him, kind of be that leader of the defense, be that ball hawk, go sideline to sideline. I feel really confident in this safety group.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's pretty stacked. I really, really like it. Bowman, I'm excited to see his development as a sophomore as well. Plus, after seeing what, Jada Coleman did this year for OU softball, hopefully,
there's something.
He's like, oh, well, damn, I'm not even the most famous one. And I'm not the most famous one in this relationship right now. I need to step my game up, maybe. Obviously we talked about Justin Broyles a little bit earlier as well, but I gotta say, we've talked about the Schmitty effect. Have you seen what Jordan Mukes looks like right now? Huge. My God,
he's huge. He comes because he came in just like as a basketball player, and now you just get a hold of like a really good strength and conditioning program. Like this is what they envisioned in this guy recruiting him. He has got a frame, and he's got so much athleticism. He's going to be fun in a couple of years.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I know he's not like ready now. Cause like you said,
I guess in 1 year, honestly, could be next year.
He's a sophomore, and if you need a guy to get, some rotation in there, that's pretty damn good. So for sure.
I think Key Lawrence is really the name that jumps out to me, much like a professional, nice lady from OKC who went on a bachelorette party. He came back from Nashville. He's coming back to Oklahoma to get to work. And I think he's going to put in some work. This is the year. I'm known for cursing players by announcing that this is their year, but I have so many defensive keys to the game puns lined up that are all just iterations of keys to the game.
This is just lining up. He's the new DTY.
To come together. No, he's not the new DTY. He's the new Marcus Major defensively.
Oh,
no.
Unfortunately for him.
For people just now listening, Ty has had this minor hard on for Marcus Major for the longest time. He's been hoping for him.
I have not. It's like and this one was atrocious because it went on forever. But when I made a wild, just ridiculous, just to be funny announcement that I liked De'Aaron King to win the Heisman as a freshman, and then he continued to play for like 7 more years in college. And then I had to ride that take his entire career because I was committed to it. That's what happened with the Marcus Major. That like 2 years ago when he was like a freshman, I was like, yeah, he's gonna be a freshman and outperform everyone. And now I've had to ride that like take, which I will continue to have to carry through this year.
Incredible. Yeah, I think that's all we have for our position breakdowns. Jameson, any final thoughts or anything?
No, I say we go over some overriding themes. You got any good questions for us, Bobby?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So overriding themes. Well, let's see here. So of the units we've talked about, I think we all kind of agreed strongest is secondary by far. But who do you think is going to be kind of the breakout star on the defense this year?
Yeah, I'll take this one first, Ty. Kind of not talking about Key Lawrence because I feel like he kind of already broke out last year. And I feel like the easy answer that everyone's going to say is Ethan Downs just because he's such a lovable type of guy. I really think Reggie Grimes can be set up for a really good year. I don't think he gets enough love because everyone loves Ethan Downs' style of working hard and, gets his nose in the dirt. And, he seems like he's that guy. He's in the latest one in practice each day. I think Reggie Grimes got a lot of talent. I saw a lot of really good things from him last year. I think that, he's a great pass rusher and he got a lot of forced fumbles too that I noticed. He could be a good momentum changer. And I think having him on the other side of the defensive end next to Ethan Downs, I think that's going to be a fun group to watch, but I really do like Reggie Grimes a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that D-line unit by the end of the season is going to be pretty damn fun. I think it's going to take some time and, really just it's not ready yet. But by the end of the season, I think it's going to be one that's really good. So I will say if you're watching OU and the defensive line's not good and you're like, oh, I thought Brent was a good defensive line guy, chill out. So it's going to be fine. Just be patient because I'm with you. I think Grimes is going to be very good there. Ty, you're I guess projected breakout player of the season.
So I have to predicate based on my previous monologue. This is a serious take, but I'm gonna go with Danny Stutzman for a special reason, and that is I've been as you guys would say in the tea leaves. I've been intercepting various bits of what we would call signals intelligence, electronic signals, things publishing, aka I've been watching YouTube videos, and specifically Hang Time on YouTube, and he has been covering sort of the inner the locker room. Obviously, that's Michael Turk, our punter. If you're not familiar, he has sort of a YouTube vlog or whatever thing. I guess he's still living in 2013, but Danny Stutzman has been on there pretty frequently, and as everyone probably knows, he's never had a snap in a game, has he? Or if he has, it's been very minor, sort of garbage time.
What? No. Danny Stutzman played a lot of big games last year.
Off on that one? Okay. Well,
yes.
Even prior to that, now that I've completely discredited everything that I've been saying, but even prior to that, he's always been sort of a not culture, but a mood setting force, I guess, in the locker room. He's been a guy that's been able to take up some leadership or he's been a voice that everyone else in the locker room has listened to even prior to him really playing, which is very, very, very rare at this level. It's like almost unheard of that a guy that doesn't really get any play time. Obviously, I guess he did, but I completely dropped the ball.
He was starting at the end of the season.
But even prior to that, before he was getting play time, he was someone that people in the locker room were listening to, and that is something truly special. And I think right there could be a thing where, regardless of on-field play and stats, if he can sort of back up that, he could be a guy that maybe isn't the biggest star, but is having sort of outsized impact on influencing the people around him, having that sort of good teammate effect, as I would like to say. And that's something that you don't necessarily see when you're watching the games, but it's something that is absolutely happening behind the curtain, and even subconsciously for everyone. Everyone that you're around in a team environment is either adding to or detracting from the effectiveness of that team. And I think he's someone that has an exponential positive impact on the team, at least from what I can tell. So I think that
I agree.
when he starts to back up some good on the field, starting to get to star level play, not to jinx him there, but I think it's going to be, he's going to be what in the animal kingdom is called I believe it's a keystone predator. So it's not necessarily the apex predator, which obviously is the one at the top, the one that eats everything. But a keystone predator, I think I'm getting that term correct, is a predator that has an outsized impact. It's something really small that takes down things larger than it. I think pythons, I believe, and eagles are considered keystone predators. So they can take out almost anything. They're not necessarily the apex, but nothing else is hunting them, and they have an outsized impact on their place in the food chain. So that's where I see Danny Stutzman and a quick zoology lesson in there as well.
I love it. I'm going to go with, talked about him a little earlier. I think Billy Bowman really takes the leap this year. More stability, obviously, being a sophomore, that helps a lot. And frankly, you can, if you look at him, he's like Jordan Mukes, is one of those guys who just looks like he's just completely changed over this offseason. I think the coaching staff change is going to help him out a lot. And I think that consistency of not having to move around, between corner and safety and back and forth. And I think that's going to be really beneficial for him. So I think we see a lot of this player who, we really hyped going in, really thought he could make a big impact, and, didn't quite hit there. I think he hits there this year. So I'm putting my money on Bowman. Also, is he returning punts? Have we confirmed that?
That's a big question. I feel like we never really get to know who's our punt returner and kick returner until it's too late. One thing we did know with Lincoln Riley, they typically would put, your most sure-handed wide receiver back there. So I'd see Marvin Mims being a punt returner. But at kick returner, he was out there a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised seeing him kind of in the back kick returner because, in high school, big time playmaker. I could see Eric graded it a little bit last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw like a Gavin Sawchuk back there just to kind of give him some run, and Billy Bowman. Those are some names I think that could be a possible kickoff returner, but punt returner, maybe I think it would be a wide receiver.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Mims could
JJ Hester too, 1982. I think that's a big time name. He'd be fun. He's going to be a fun name to talk about as wide receiver. There's a lot of guys that can, kind of take a huge jump, and he's a guy who's been getting a lot of really good reports in this spring and summer practice. So, yeah, we'll talk about that next week whenever we break down the offense.
For sure.
I will say real quick on kick and punt return, we're so thin in some areas. I would not expect Stoops and Mims for sure, and I would not expect Eric Gray. I wouldn't expect any RBs, really, probably. I would love someone named Hester returning kicks or punts, just on this, the tiny bit of the little sliver of tons of mental gymnastics meta there. We got to go for that, right? Like that's
right.
That's when you're picking horses for the Kentucky Derby, when you see one that's like, it's named like a Seabiscuit, but it's spelled slightly differently, and you're like, oh yeah, I've got to go for that one. Might be like since we already broke the seal with F1 analogies, might be a Mick Schumacher situation.
Nice.
But,
wait,
gotta go with the meta.
Has anyone ever named a horse Limp Seabiscuit?
I just was thinking about
Seabiscuit
with a Z, with like Limp Biscuit. I just started laughing to myself.
I was thinking Seabiscuit, but it starts with a T, like a tsunami. But yeah, I think at a higher level than you guys. That's been proven.
You're just on a higher plane.
Yeah, it's like I'm on a podcast with single cell organisms here.
That's funny. One last question in this pod.
Yeah.
One last question in this pod. I want to hear both of y'all's thoughts. And then we'll kind of go into closing remarks. What kind of level do you think this defense can be? Can this be a top 30 defense? Can this be, even top 20? Or do you think it's safer to say top 40-esque defense? Do you think we have the scheme plus the players to have some national attention and respect?
I mean, I think certainly it as a personnel wise, it's taken a dip from last year. Coaching has not. How good that coaching can get them, I'm not sure. I think the scheme alone is going to help out a lot. I think this is a unit that starts out kind of in the 30s, and then, by the end of the season, I could see it, I'm optimistic as hell. I could see it being top 15 by the end of the year.
Wow,
But,
that's a big time
yeah,
move.
I think it's all about the amount of time it takes. And I don't know. I think this year, specifically looking at the other offenses in the Big 12, I'm not
Okay,
too
that's a good point.
terribly, it's not, Purdy's gone. You lose a little bit there from Baylor as
That's
well.
the first name that you think of in terms of being scared of the.
Okay, maybe not scared, but I'm
Brees
talking about.
Hall,
I was just talking
maybe
about.
we could talk about Brees Hall instead.
Yeah, okay, fair. I just
He was Mr. Irrelevant in the NFL draft. Brees Hall was number one running back.
Okay, good point. I think I'm not that afraid of the Big 12 offenses this year. I think it's not going to be too bad. Even though Brock Purdy, noted NPC, is no longer here. So I don't know. I think overall just the offensive talent has kind of dipped a bit. Obviously can be concerned about Texas. I'm not really that concerned about Texas. But that's one game. So I think overall it's a more defensive conference, and I don't think we're going to have to worry about the Bean Man dropping 200 yards on us like he did against in the OU Kansas game this year. I don't think that will happen. There are going to be issues, yeah, but I think by the end of the year it's going to be a really sharp defense. So again, I'm optimistic though, so I could be wrong. I once said that Buki, Brennan Radley Hiles was going to win Player of the Year, and that was wrong. So these preseason picks can be weird. Ty, what do you think?
Yeah, Jameson, you broached the question, so I will go now. So I think quick response, cowboy style, shooting from the hip to Bobby. I don't think we'll be a top 15 defense by a lot of people's metrics, because there are always those teams that, not to already sound like an SEC fan, but they don't play anyone and just have these ridiculous, inflated, there's a team with just a trash defense that plays in the group of five that's always they're top 5 in defense because they don't allow whatever school that doesn't even fund their football team to score touchdowns on them or whatever. So the top 15 I think is kind of rough for me, because there's a lot of really established, a lot of people, but I think we could be realistically a top 25 team. So obviously I've sort of painted myself into a range of 10 there, which probably wasn't wise for how accurate I am. But I think it comes down to, we're not going to have the best players. We're not going to have the best stars necessarily. And that's not to detract from anyone, but that star power, I guess, to use the video game term, matters to a big extent in college football. And we're not going to have an established system, but I think we have enough time and enough buy-in and enough skill and ability on our team to do what we do with very little defect. And if I know Brent Venables, if what I've been studying and learning about Brent Venables is true, and what he's going to try to implement on the defense, he's not going to come in like, not to name any names, but maybe the new staff at USC, and try to shoot for the moon year one, because he knows that when you're talking about building a powerhouse, which, a lot of people say, oh, don't jinx it, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build the next Bama, the next Clemson. That is our goal. We are the University of Oklahoma. You're not going to get everything year one. You shouldn't expect that. But what you can do is build, increments each year. And like we talked about, our line especially is a very short term when it comes to the guys. We're going to have a lot of turnover. The linebackers, very excited about that, because maybe we have a little bit more continuity there. The secondary, that one's hard to tell because of just how much skill that position requires. But I think if what we choose to do, we do it well with very little or minimal defects, we could really find ourselves in the top 25 because things like we talked about, because the sort of expected down year for offenses in the Big 12. Again, we're week 0. Who knows what's going to occur? There's always breakout stars every year. That's the nature and what makes it fun. But I think that if we have realistic expectations and good implementation of realistic goals, which I think 100% we're going to have that, we have the skill and ability to execute that good enough. It's not about being the best at everything. You just have to be, well, obviously you have to be good enough to win every game. But it's in a term in my last job we like to use a lot is just brilliance in the basics. There's nothing fancy about it. Tackle good, don't get exposed, don't blow your assignments, and it's defensively. It's really, if you have those 3 things, if you never blow assignments or very rarely do, if you never miss tackles or very rarely do, and if you just have good fundamentals, even if you have a really, really bad scheme, you're still going to do really well in college football, especially with the wide variance of play and skill, especially within the Big 12. So I think top 25 is not unrealistic. I hope I didn't get jinxed here, and I know I went long, but I think top 25 is very, very realistic. But I, again, wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen. But I think we will certainly be top half for sure.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I think top 30, if we're top 30, we'll be very happy moving into the season. So I think both of y'all have very optimistic takes too. But overall, I think this was a really good pod. Breaking down the defensive line was a lot of fun because that's going to be a really fun group to watch. And then the rest of the defense, it should be pretty good. So if you guys like this content, if you're new here, definitely subscribe because we'll be breaking down the offense next week. And there's a couple of names that I think could break out, be that type of guy in the offense that maybe not as many people are thinking about. So we'll dive into that next week. And then moving on, we'll have some more fun. I'm preparing a OU Sooners trivia battle where Bobby will take on an opponent that to be determined. Ty, you can
not
probably
me. No, not me.
I don't want you to go against Bobby.
Too easy of a win, probably.
I'll be working on that, and that'll be a really fun way to kind of remember what happened last season and kind of get you up to date and ready for the season right before week 0 hits. So I got that in the works. So if you like this kind of content that we're putting, hit up the subscribe button, and we'll be having some really good content the next couple weeks.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's the final run here. We're about to just really be full speed ahead when it comes to football season. We're really pumped. And, let's be honest, last year we kind of came in strong after, the whole Lincoln thing. So we're happy to have all y'all with us. And we appreciate everyone who watched us live on YouTube as well. So subscribe if you like if you want to see us live, you want to see it first, that's where to find us. We're usually broadcasting either 7 p.m. Central or 8 p.m. Central on Sundays. So, and we got our SEC preview coming up too. So a lot of really exciting stuff down the pipeline here for the Schooner Pod. So, Ty, any final things you want to say before we head out?
Yeah, just a real quick thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. You guys are not why we do it. We do it because Bobby has blackmail information on both Jameson and I, and he loves this, and he makes us do this. But it is a positive that you guys listen to this as well. So, but really, it's all about the viewers. And special shout out, I do heart our lone sponsor, DraftKings. They pay us a very meager sum of 3 pence a day.
Oh no!
They actually, that's true. They pay us in Old English pence. It's very difficult to convert those coins into American money. We're taxed like 17 times on it. It's rather absurd. But one day we will get the courage to go to DraftKings and ask for our second bowl of porridge for all of our hard work. Oliver Twist reference. You were not expecting an Oliver Twist reference in this college football podcast. But we are learned individuals, so we will continue with these wise references.
That's incredible. Well, folks, thanks again for listening, whether it be on YouTube or the next day on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., etc. We'll see you soon, and have a good week, everyone. Boomer Sooner.